Sounds great.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Balerion Space Ventures podcast. Today, we are joined by Marianne Snow, the CEO of Eascra Biotech. Eascra is developing a novel drug delivery method based on what are called Janus-based nanomaterials that were originally developed in Yupen Cheng's lab at the University of Connecticut. This company is also one of the leaders in using space-based manufacturing to develop an improved product. Marianne, we are really excited about what Eascra is doing, and thank you for joining.
No, it's our pleasure today, Doug. We really appreciate your interest and can't wait to chat.
Well, great. Before we get into the company, I was wondering if you could tell us your story and how you ended up leading a biotech company.
I've got a fairly non-traditional background. I have started other companies before, but this is while I've worked with life science companies, I hadn't actually started a life science company. But my co-founder and business partner, Yupeng Chen, who is a professor of biomedical engineering at the University of Connecticut, is a very dear friend. He and I have known each other for 20 years.
Wow.
I met him when he first came to the US to complete his graduate studies, his PhD work at Brown University. We became very, very close. He and my husband and I have spent a lot of time together the past 20 years because he didn't have any local family, so we became kind of his local family. And he and I both had started other companies before, and we didn't have stellar experiences. You know, startups aren't for faint-hearted, but a lot of them fail. And so we both went through that experience, and we promised each other if we were going to do another something that we would do it together because we have very complementary skills. I really focus on the business end, the operations end, and he is just a brilliant scientist.
Hmm. That's a great story. It gives a lot of meaning to the company you guys are building. That's cool. Could you tell us a little bit more about Yupeng's background and what he had developed to kind of get this the anchor for this company?
So I mentioned that Yupeng is a professor of biomedical engineering at the University of Connecticut. So Esker is an academic spin out. Um, uh, uh, he originally trained as a chemist in all of his undergraduate work and leading through his master's work was all in chemistry. But when he came to Brown, he got very, very interested in biomedical engineering. And so he has a dual focus for his work. It's been not only on the chemistry side, but also on the biomedical engineering side. Thus, the technology that he developed, which was really based on work that he's been doing for the last 20 years, that's associated with synthesizing molecules that are inspired by DNA. So our base molecule is a synthetic monomer that specifically mimics DNA, has a customizable side chain, so we can make chemical modifications to that technology to help target it to a specific cell or tissue. And this has just been a real passion of his. Once he got his PhD at Brown, he actually worked at Rhode Island Hospital in the orthopedics department. Thus, our early focus on our lead indication, which is an osteoarthritis uh, uh,
Okay.
uh, application. And he transitioned to the University of Connecticut in 2019. And he was there, he was up and running, and he and I had been talking for a very long time. And in 2000, at the very end of 2021, he called me and he said, I think it's time. And I said, are you sure? Because it's kind of a biotech winter right now. So how are we going to find funding? But we took a leap of faith. We launched the company, and we've been on a very steep trajectory ever since.
Well, that's that's incredible. I think when I met with him, he told me about this background of the name Janus. It was like a two-faced Roman god, and but I guess what's interesting about that is what you were alluding to just now is that you can do two things. You can target something, and then you can also have the drug you're building. So, is that the main benefit? I guess I'm curious about what it is that's being built and what the benefits are. Is it people use the word nanomaterials, and it's obviously a buzzword, but what's the breakthrough that's enabling here?
So, the our Janus-based nanoparticle is actually based on the Janus-based monomer that I had alluded to. And what we're doing, Doug, is that monomer assembles into tubular structures that we can then use to encapsulate a variety of therapeutic cargoes. And so while we are a very powerful delivery technology, and when I say powerful delivery technology, I can give you some specific examples. Our unique structure, which is a rod-shaped tube, think of it as a heat-seeking missile, right?
Okay.
Can be targeted to specific cells and tissues and has superior capability to penetrate dense tissues, particularly tissues that are very difficult for more traditional delivery technologies that are already established in the market. I'm talking about articular cartilage, which is particularly avascular. I'm talking about kidneys, which
Hmm.
are particularly dense. And I'm also talking about different types of ECM-rich solid tumors, which, again, don't have a good history of having technologies that have the capability to not only be able to penetrate, but also penetrate into the endosome, deliver a full therapeutic cargo, and to do it in a way that doesn't kick off the immune system. So these are just some of the functional benefits that our JBMP has.
Okay. I mean, it sounds potentially very powerful and uniquely capable.
It's really interesting because we know right at this point in time that lots of people are thinking about different types of therapeutic delivery. And we also know that thanks to the success of the COVID vaccine, lipid nanoparticles own about 80% of the delivery market. We also know that there are viral vectors, that there are people who are working on different types of nanoparticles, gold nanoparticles, and other constructs that they're looking to tune to be able to get into a cellular tissue. We're finding that our unique capabilities, that customizability, the shape that allows for a very slim base, which can really penetrate those hard to penetrate places. And not only that, because we're a synthetic monomer, we can not only get into the endosome, we're releasing a payload based on the change of the pH in the endosome, but we also don't kick off the immune system because of our profile, which is inspired by DNA.
Okay. Interesting. Uh, could could you tell us just so kind of our audience understands, for those of us, we talk a lot about space technology and defense technology here, and biotech, it's this whole, I was trying to think of an analogy like this is, in a way it's almost like a satellite bus or something, or it's almost like Amazon Web Services, but that at the same time, you're also developing the actual mission profile of it. Like you said, you have this beachhead of osteoarthritis. Could you help us understand kind of is there like a big picture way of understanding the drug delivery kind of landscape, and then where this fits in, and this kind of unique advantage of having penetration and targeted delivery?
Sure. And obviously we're going to talk a little bit about advanced manufacturing in microgravity. And
Yes. Yeah.
and we will absolutely have that conversation because um uh it we didn't start out intending to be a space company. I just want to let everybody know that some folks are actually targeting space as their beachhead market. And for us, it was actually an Earth application.
Hmm.
And we were really kind of looking at the molecule as a delivery technology on Earth. And we've already had a significant sponsored research collaboration with a top 10 pharmaceutical company who's been evaluating the technology specifically for an Earth product that they're working on. So our capabilities have attracted folks who have an interest in penetration in places that other delivery targets have not been able to achieve. So I want to make that clear. And I
Yeah.
think, as you're talking about, what's the landscape at this point is that the lack of versatile delivery technologies that can be customized and targeted is actually a major bottleneck in drug
Hmm.
discovery today, particularly because of some things that are happening with personalized medicine. I would say that it is a particularly difficult gating factor for things like gene editing, RNA therapeutics, for those dense tissues, because when you're looking at the current delivery technologies, they tend to be something that collect in the liver. So if you're using them for a liver application, that's one thing. If you're using them for a vaccine, that's another thing. But repeat dosings for, say, a cancer application, for a chronic disease application like osteoarthritis, kidney disease, these sorts of things, not a good choice because of the immunogenicity issues, the immune system concerns on a long-term basis. So this is top of mind for lots and lots of people in the drug discovery world at this moment. And there are a lot of companies who are trying to tune lipid nanoparticles, AAVs, gold nanoparticle, a whole bunch of peptides, you name it. They're trying to figure out the holy grail. And so we are in that group of people who believe we've actually come up with a solution that is not only sustainable, but scalable for commercial use and overcomes a lot of the major barriers that are hindering drug delivery today.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, it's what you're describing is really an enabling technology, though. Then it's really allowing. There's things we can conceive of, but you're giving people the method to be able to achieve getting their drug or their new development to where they want it to go.
That's really true. And I would say, Doug, that, obviously, as I said to you, our beachhead market, our beachhead indication is osteoarthritis because that's really been the focus of my partner's work for the last 20 years.
Hmm.
But we've got significant data in the kidney field as well as the solid tumor field as well. But if you're going to be a delivery technology, then the first thing anybody will ask you is give me some valid data that indicates specifically your capacity to not only load a cargo, what kind of cargoes can you load? Can you get into the target cell or tissue? And then can you deliver the goods and what's the efficacy and also what is the toxicity profile? Can you do it safely?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've got kind of two questions that from what you just said there. Maybe just with the second thing that you talked about with toxicity. If I'm hearing you correctly, I mean, any drug you take a pill, you take an IV, and you were kind of talking about it, the medicine might collect somewhere you don't want to collect it to collect, and you just have to deal with that, and that's going to drive side effects. And obviously, the more targeted what you're giving is the presumably the less toxicity and less side effects you're going to have, and then especially if you're not also getting if it doesn't seem to trigger the immune system. And this would be delivered systemically, right? I think it would be like an IV or something, or
Depends on the application. For joint injuries, we're actually doing a direct injection directly into the joint and into the joint cartilage.
oh, cool. Okay.
But we're using systemic delivery for not only kidney applications, we have done it with some orthopedic applications. Specifically, we've done systemic delivery for growth plate penetration, and then also systemic for cancer.
Okay. So like for the ones where you're doing you talked about the ECM solid tumor application, that would be like kind of like chemotherapy, a systemic one. Okay.
Yeah, and what's very, very interesting about our encapsulation process is because of the tube structure, which is really the encapsulation mechanism. That tube structure can accommodate both small cargoes, so something like an siRNA versus something larger like an mRNA or even Cas9, which is, you're getting into gene editors, right?
Hmm.
And so we've loaded our particle with known FDA approved oncology drugs that are very good at reducing tumor size, but they're very caustic to the patient. They have systemic side effects that are pretty unsustainable. And so the encapsulation process, because the tubes are molecule to molecule with the cargo, we're providing some systemic protection to the patients.
Okay. That's a perfect segue I kind of wanted to get into the osteoarthritis application, but that what you just mentioned, um, yeah, you can be developing your own drugs that are enabled by this technology, but you can also take now existing drugs that are limited by their side effect profile or something, and then make those usable or at least
Yeah,
significantly
potentially.
improved. Yeah,
Yeah, and so we
yeah.
could potentially use drugs that are off patent that have good efficacy, but we could potentially give them additional patent life
Hmm.
by allowing for a new mechanism which would not only reduce side effects but would target the tumor target in a way that would also provide better outcomes for cancer patients.
Okay. No, that's great. Um, yeah, there's so much, there's so many, it's like you can think of 100 things already that you'd want to try and do once you have this. So but you're going to start with, well, one of the things you'll start with is osteoarthritis. That was one of Yupeng's interests. So could you tell us a little about that? Because I guess you've got this delivery method, and that could be a product in itself. And you're just saying we have this delivery method, but then you're saying if you have like an initial application, it allows you to prove the technology. So are you developing a way to target cartilage and then also a therapeutic for the cartilage? And what's this initial application looking like?
Yeah, our lead application is actually an mRNA therapeutic for osteoarthritis
Okay.
applications. So it's a direct injection to the joint, and
Hmm.
we have, while we're a preclinical company, what we're doing is we're working very hard to move it forward to phase one clinical trials. And the reason we're doing that is because obviously in today's world, folks are looking for technology that is as de-risked as possible. Now, we both know, and for anybody on the call today who knows anything about life science, bringing a drug to market is no joke. It is a long, arduous, expensive process. And I think the latest estimates are it's something like $1 billion to actually get it into the market and get it up and running. But one of the reasons that we think that it's important is because obviously it's a new technology. And so the more data that we have that supports our findings and really validates what we're talking about when we talk about the functionality, and also provides us with background data that we need in order to be able to potentially partner with a pharmaceutical or some sort of biotech or life science company that needs therapeutic delivery. So while we work on our own product, we're also seeking partnerships with folks so that we can become a component to their therapeutic and work with somebody who's got a bigger bank account than us so that we can advance the technology to market while also generating revenue, which will help us to be able to advance a lead product.
Okay, that's smart. So helping others deliver their products and then also developing your own products.
Right. You have to,
Okay.
when you're an early stage life science startup, you're always thinking as scrappy as possible. What can I do to generate revenue now today? And
Yeah.
that generally starts out as sponsored research collaborations with pharmaceutical
Hmm.
companies to proof of concept, to complete proof of concept work for your product, build those relationships, and really establish yourself as a product with integrity, a technology with integrity.
Yeah. I mean, with such a powerful tool, I would think it would be in demand. So,
Well, I think that I believe that, and part of that is because I believe the technology, and also I've worked with Yupeng a very long time. I actually helped edit his dissertation many years ago.
okay.
So it's like, so I have a passion and also a fundamental belief in what we're doing and the potential it has to help patients, which is really our main goal. I mean, we launched the company to take something to market that we think will actually have a very positive effect for patients.
Okay. Well, that's great. Could we talk a little bit about how you make these? How do you make a Janus-based nanoparticle?
So Janus-based nanoparticles start out as base molecules, the base monomer. And so the base monomer is actually suspended in liquid. We use distilled water in a larger scale production environment. We could use some other appropriate reagent, but right now, with the work that we're doing, we're using just distilled water. And then really through basic pi-pi stacking, which is, you're talking about a base molecule that has a positive charge on one side, a negative charge on the other side. And as you have a negative and a positive charge, it attracts other molecules that form what we call a rosette. Think of a donut, has a hole in the middle, and it's got six molecules in a rosette plane. Those rosette planes stack together like dinner plates and then form the tubes. And so the tubes themselves are actually formed with very mild agitation because of the positive and negative charge. They form together very, very easily. And those tubes are then taken, and what we do is we load our cargo, and we're actually loading the cargo with microfluidic chips. We can use fluidic chips. We've also experimented with tea mixers, and then that agitation process not only loads the particle, but sloughs off the end of the tubes that aren't loaded so that you have a fully formed particle, which could be 10 to 20 nanometers across at its base,
Wow.
at its head and base, and yet have a full therapeutic cargo that then can be delivered to the targeted site. And we determine the targeted site very early in the process. And what we're doing is we're actually making modifications to the base molecule at the early start of the production process.
Okay.
So we're creating a library of base molecules that have been optimized for a particular type of cell and tissue type. So we can make modifications not only to the DNA-based pairs, but also to the side chain and the base pairs as well as the side chain. Those modifications will determine its targeting capabilities.
Okay. And are you doing this all at once? Do you assemble the tubules and then later add the target and the thing? Okay. So
We're modifying the molecule
yeah.
to the target. We're assembling the tubes.
Hmm.
Then we're mixing the tubes with the cargo. And that mixing process also sloughs off any part of the tube that has not loaded. So you have a
Okay.
resulting particle at the end.
Okay. And that first step when you were modifying the tube, that's the part that makes it go after a certain target?
We actually modified the base molecule at the very beginning before we even make the tubes.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And then you're adding the delivery product at the end. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And so I guess that kind of gets to the part. I mean, you talked to us before we started how you have a mission up on the International Space Station, the ISS, right now.
Yeah.
And you were talking about this before. You didn't intend on becoming a space company. You don't do something in space just because it's cool. It's got to add you some benefit. And it sounds like you guys figured out is there something in this process that's better when you don't have gravity?
So, microgravity came into our calculation, our strategy as a very early company in 2021 when I told you the first question I said to my partner is, we sure we want to do this in the biotech winter when nobody is funding preclinical
Right.
preclinical new technology. Nobody was doing it. And I said, how are we going to fund ourselves? And my partner, Yupong, was at a space conference in Washington, D.C., because he was already putting an experiment in space. He was already working with NASA. And he discovered that NASA had a program called the In-Space Manufacturing program that was looking for candidates that they deemed would benefit from microgravity. And because we have a lot of similarities to protein crystals, and anybody who knows anything about life science and microgravity, protein crystals are kind of the foundational work that really proved that growing crystals in space not only allows them to be more uniform, more homogeneous, but those structures have unique capabilities that can't be duplicated on Earth. And so Yupeng actually called me from Washington, D.C. I was filing the papers for the company. And he said, what do you think about becoming a space company? And I just sort of chuckled and I said, well, they give us money. And he said, they will. They'll give us money to do proof of concept studies, and we can take the particles to space. We can do corresponding ground studies. And the worst thing that will happen is we get a lot of data out of it. We have a very interesting experience. We meet a lot of highly skilled folks for our network. And we can also determine if microgravity has positive effects on the particle. Well, lo and behold, in 2022, NASA gave us $2 million, just shy of $2 million, about 1.85, almost $1.9 million. In starting in 2000, we figured out the logistics, and starting very early in 2023, we did our first flight. And in 2023, 24, and 25, we did 5 flights. And
Wow.
we just literally launched in early March, early April, actually, April 10th. And we're at the space station right now. We have a live cargo. This is our sixth flight to the station. We're planning for number 7 already, and we have 5 more flights that are in queue.
Wow.
So we're off and running, and clearly, we have discovered that microgravity will amp up our product so it's 40 to 50% more efficacious than it is on Earth.
Okay, so it's an improved product. It sounds like, I mean, I guess when Yupong contacted you originally and said that you're ready to go, this was actually before you'd had this
We
kind
had
of
no
microgravity
idea, Doug.
aspect of it, but you did have a
No
product.
idea.
You had something that was promising, looks like it's going to work, and then space helps you build it better.
Yeah, it turns out that space actually, think of our Earth product as highly effective or any disruptive technology because of some of its capabilities. And now we can offer a 2.0 that's 40 to 50% better. So
Okay.
as we're developing an Earth product that is pretty spectacular, we're also working on a 2.0 advanced version that's even more spectacular.
Okay. Yeah, great. So what does a better crystal get you? I mean, does it allow you to use a lower dose for the same effect, or what does that enable?
So while we're not a crystal, we're, a nano construct. We start out as particles in liquid, just like a protein crystal starts out as particles in liquid. And just like crystals that are grown, we also benefit from the absence of gravity and convection, right? You don't have to deal with friction, you don't have to deal with convection. It's a diffusion environment. And when the particles assemble, they're more uniform. They don't experience sedimentation, which means they're much more homogeneous. It also means that we can load a little extra into the particle without reducing its capacity to be able to penetrate cells and tissues.
Okay, got it. So enables a little more drug delivery for this with the same size delivery product. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And since you've started this, and I mean, you've completed so many missions, you have so many in the queue, and it looks like you've, in the process, developed some other partnerships.
We have developed lots and lots of partnerships. First of all, I mentioned to you that we spent 2025 working with a top 10 pharma partner. So we've actually been validating with life science companies that are real pharmaceutical companies. We also not only work with NASA, but we work with the Center for Advanced Science and Space, which is the group that manages the International Space Station. We have been supported by AFWorks Air Force as a um, troop readiness for joint injuries.
Hmm.
We have NSF funding. We've actually raised 8 million in non-dilutive funding to date. So we have taken significant leaps forward in not only securing funding during a very difficult time, but advancing not only the space product, but also the Earth product simultaneously. We're doing all of that work in parallel. And we also have, when you work with institutions like NASA, you meet the ESA, the European Space Agency, you meet JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, and then you also meet lots of folks like yourself who are not only space curious, but who have expertise in and of themselves. So we're working with physicists, we're working with orthopedic people, we're working with physicians, we're working with major medical institutions. We're working with different governmental agencies as well as academic institutions. And so we have a huge network of folks that every time we run into a question, we have a question, how do we solve this? We have an interest we'd like to establish a clear pathway to regulatory approval for space-made products.
Hmm.
If you work with one agency, then having very nice conversations with other agencies like the FDA, it helps because now you're not just a little teeny startup, you're a part of a coalition with kind of a shared mission, which is really, really nice. And then obviously, if you're going to build something new, you need a supply chain that can support that. And
Hmm.
not only a supply chain that can support production on the ground, but a supply chain that can support production 250 miles up. And
Right.
that means that we have the privilege of working with the pioneers who are thinking about replacements for the International Space Station, who are reimagining and who are really forming the basis for a sustainable low Earth economy that will then support whatever's happening in the lunar environment and beyond. So it is very humbling to work with some just extraordinary people with extraordinary vision.
Yeah, that's exciting. There's a lot to that. When you're doing this right now, just a basic question, but in the lab here on the ground,
Mm.
you've got people working there, and on the ISS, is it the same thing, or is there a person there working your experiment that has a kind of a procedure to follow, or is it automated, or what is it?
Yeah, and so I was mentioning to you earlier that, we have a live payload on station right now.
Yes.
And while our goal is to be able to develop very GMP compliant production environments that are closed environments that really get assembled on the ground, meet all FDA approval criteria, regulatory criteria, can go up into microgravity. You can just trigger the production process in microgravity and then bring it back down. Right at this particular point in time, what we're doing is we do a lot of crew-enabled work because
Hmm.
we're still working through fundamentals, and we need samples and we need it now. So as we're building the hardware, we're also working with the crew, not only on the ISS, but also with private space companies like Axiom Space are doing private mission crews,
Yeah.
where they have international crews of folks who are going up on station and who are helping science companies like us achieve our next commercial milestones. And so we've worked with Axiom Space Crews. Today, we were actually working with a lovely astronaut. Her name is Sophie. She's a French astronaut.
Hmm.
And we were also working with another one of the US astronauts, Chris. And we were literally making particles today.
Okay. Wow. Uh, yeah, that's exciting. And then ultimately down the road, as you mentioned, you'll I mean, well, there's two things because I guess, that crew-enabled work hopefully is going to expand here soon, as the time goes, and that'll be available. But then I guess you'll also be looking to have this so that you're sending up an automated process that scales. And
Yeah, and it would actually be more in the commercial sector, which means we are privileged to know not only the Axiom Space people who are working on things. We've met the Voyager team. We've
Mhm.
met the Vast people are very good friends of ours. We
Good.
also have had conversations with free flyers. We know about Varda. We've talked to Redditas. We've talked to the exploration company. We also have very non-traditional partnerships. Rogue Space. Rogue Space
Okay.
is actually putting up a perpetual platform that will be orbital, but their primary mission is not only satellite maintenance and repositioning, but also space junk. And but at the same time, they're looking for different ways to drive revenue. And because we were friends, they said, we're in the early design stage. We're going to have power. Can we plug your box into our platform? And would that work? And we're going to try it.
Oh, cool. Wow. So you're already kind of well on your way for that.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Um, and then could you tell us then about that other part that you'd spoken about earlier? What is the regulatory process looking like? I mean, we've been told that once this space infrastructure gets in place, the first 200 applications of in-space manufacturing are going to be biotech related. But I mean, is the regulatory pathway, is it really kind of to be determined at this point?
So, if you're going to actually open up a new manufacturing environment, and that's how we think about it. I mean, you can manufacture in many different places. You can manufacture at the bottom of the ocean. There are people trying to do that because, the pressure requirements are actually lending themselves to something wonderful for whatever it is that they're trying to
Hmm.
produce. So microgravity is just a new type of manufacturing environment. And when you're trying to open up that opportunity and establish a new manufacturing environment as legitimate, then part of this is really sitting down with the agencies who have existing regulatory capabilities in place and saying to them, we have a new environment. We believe we can apply the existing standards, and there may have to be a couple of modifications, like, you're going to have to modernize how we monitor, but we're not saying you're going to have to re relax the regulatory standards at all. We're just going to take them and apply them to a whole new place. And when you're going to do that, Doug, you have to start that conversation as early as possible.
Yeah.
So we're part of a coalition of life science and biotech companies that are doing work in this new manufacturing environment. And we've already had conversations with the FDA that we intend to continue to help educate them, to validate for them, and to also really continue to send them the message. This is just a new manufacturing environment. We can take existing regulatory standards, apply it to this new variable, and we can be just as efficacious and just as uh, um, structurally sound as any medical product that is produced on Earth.
That makes sense. Yeah, a new environment, just like if you wanted to do it in the pressure conditions of deep water, or this is microgravity.
Right.
Is an element of that the transport? I mean, is it once you have assembled what you want to, does it do okay coming back to Earth?
We have a very stable structure. Once the particles formed,
Yeah,
it's not going to change. It does not change. It's very stable.
that's great.
And
That's
not
great.
only that,
Yeah.
not only is it stable, but we could encapsulate very fragile cargoes like mRNA, and we've kept mRNA viable and lively for 6 months and counting. So,
Really?
and so we've eliminated the need for cold chain with mRNA therapeutics when they're encapsulated with our nanoparticle.
Well, wow, that seems like a pretty big achievement kind of in its own right, separate from everything else you've just described.
Well, I think it all depends on if you thought that that was a barrier, right? If you've already got
Okay.
a cold
Hmm.
chain, because the COVID vaccines um, uh, uh, have certainly influenced people's thinking about that, right? But I
Hmm.
would say if you're in an economic part of the world that has struggled with cold chain requirements, then
Yeah.
we can solve that problem immediately, right?
Yeah, right. Okay. Um, that's really that's pretty amazing. a really amazing amount of work that's been done to advance this. And so for Escrow, what does it look like now going forward? If we're looking at Escrow 2035 or something, what's the sequence that you hope to see now in these coming years as the company and product grows?
So our mission, our first mission is to do exactly what we always intended to do, which is really work to advance the particle so that we can get it into the market as an earth product, first of all, so that we can establish its credibility and build market integrity and market confidence. And
Like
that,
with whatever application, just if it's OA but just something to get it out there the first time. Okay.
right.
Yep.
And at the same time, we're going to, in parallel, work with all of our partners to create a GMP grade supply chain and chain of custody capability to be able to produce the particle in space as an advanced product in the future by 2035, with the understanding that we're advancing conversations with the FDA for pathway to approval. And as a delivery technology, we're now really kind of a great option for a pharmaceutical company that wants a unique differentiator but doesn't want something that's relatively de-risked. But if we've already set up the supply chain and we've got the regulatory question answered, and we also have a product that has been proven in the market as delivery technology, we can be a component. We've got all of the supply chain in place, and we may be inviting pharmaceuticals into a new environment that they never even considered before, allowing them to really create quite a competitive moat that other people would have a hard time breaching.
Yeah, it seems like it. I think we said that kind of in the beginning of the conversation. You could see where there's probably a lot of ideas out there where they would really like to do something and they just didn't know how to get it delivered, get it to the tissue.
Right. And if we've already got something and that product is already in the market and it already has commercial legs, we all know that patents have shelf life, right? And
Hmm.
when you get to the point of loss of exclusivity and you're saying, what's the next move? If all we have to do is really kind of have a change in manufacturing venue, but all of the structural pieces are in place to do that, and we can do it cost effectively, then imagine the advantages.
Right. Okay, so kind of in parallel, the first step you're going to have kind of JNP version 1.0 on Earth, but with an application like maybe osteoarthritis or something in the kidneys, maybe these ECM tumors, maybe all of them. And at the same time, you're going to be working on GMP for the GMP 2.0, just as an improved um, of the same thing.
Yep.
But at that point, maybe some of these pharmaceutical companies will already be looking to have used this or already using it by the time you have that out.
Right. And I think that that's important too, because appreciate that, if you're going to manufacture in a new and a emerging manufacturing environment, then you're also just going to have the change management conversations that have to happen so that as you bring that product into the market, how can you validate that it's safe? How can you actually convince a payer to pay for it? How can you convince a physician to prescribe it? How can you incent a patient to take it, right?
Right.
Think about all of the current concerns about whether it's different types of medications, whether it is vaccines, the conversations that are happening with vaccines right now. Imagine if I took you to your doctor's office and said, I've got something that's pretty fantastic. And guess what? It just happens to be manufactured in space. You
Right.
know, uh,
Right.
how are you feeling about being a person who's taking advantage of that, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, kind of establishing that, I guess, the trust in the product and the these base use cases and then build up that reputation. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
cool.
we understand that this is it's not for faint-hearted.
Yeah,
And and it's actually kind of funny, Doug, because a lot of times the life science industry in general can be pretty conservative and pretty skeptical. Rightly so, because I mean, really, we're developing things that are going to be introduced into a human host, and
sure, of
that's
course.
serious business, right?
Yes. Yep.
But at the same time, very often people will say to me, space is hard. How are you going to make it work? And I just sort of chuckle, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I have a I have a preclinical life science company. That's hard. I'm trying to build a new technology and prove that it works and convince people. That's hard,
Right.
and I'm trying to, build sustainability, in a marketplace that's not so friendly to new technologies and preclinical startups. That's hard. I said, so space is just another hard in a sea of hards.
Yeah, that is right. It's one more, but it's of a piece with everything else that goes along with trying to do what you're doing, making a new delivery method. I mean, and
And
definitely you have to be careful doing these things. Sometimes something comes up you didn't know about, and there's side effects and you can hurt people. But it really seems overall that this technology it could really help a lot of people and a lot of different applications, and be pretty broadly applicable.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
And I certainly believe so personally. So this is something that I have a lot of passion about because I have worked with Yupeng a long time. I see his dedication. I see how serious he takes things. I know how brilliant he is as a scientist, and um, uh, so I think it would be hard for us to do the work we're doing unless we had that conviction in the product.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really great project. I'm really excited to see how this goes, both as a new drug delivery technique and then also as, an early application of space manufacturing. I mean, there are only so many people doing this. Really not that much, and I mean, you guys are really a kind of the case study on early applications of biotech and in space manufacturing. So it's
Well,
fun.
it's actually not surprising to hear that the prediction is that life science companies will kind of be some of the lead candidates because, when you think of nanotechnology and you think of, price per dose that you can get out of a relatively low volume. And I want you to think of really kind of some of the fantastic emerging treatments like CAR T, right? This
Hmm.
is a personalized medicine that is really having an impact and revolutionizing many folks who didn't have options before. And it's not cheap to start. But as we are developing these technologies and as we start to see the manufacturing efficiencies, the cost efficiencies as we scale, but even at a lower volume, uh, therapeutics are one of the most profitable products per ounce of any
Yeah,
product on Earth, right?
for sure. Yeah, probably nothing more than that, right? I mean, for the volume, the price per volume,
Yeah, the price per volume is it's pretty sustainable when you're
yeah.
thinking about can you make money in this?
Right. Right. Yeah, there's two things. Yeah, it's the just the science of it in terms of being able to build things in a much better way, like you described with your nanomaterials, and you also talked about it with crystals. And then there's the price per volume. So there are two things that really can push the life sciences for being an early application in space.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Oh, Marianne, I've learned a ton from this, and it's an exciting company and product. Is there anything else you wanted to get across to anybody before we finished up?
No, the only thing that I would say to everyone is, this is a team sport. We stand on the shoulders of folks like Paul Reichert, who was working with Merck for years and doing protein crystallization work. That really became the basis that allowed us entry into the market. And we've got other colleagues and other just supporters and collaborators that are doing extraordinary work, and we couldn't do what we're doing without all of the folks in our network who have been so generous with their knowledge, their expertise, all of those sorts of things. So anybody who's doing a startup, particularly in the space environment, please, please, it's a generous community, and it's something where we all have to work together to actually make it happen.
Yeah, it's a good message. So, well, great. Well, Marianne, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Doug. Thank
Okay,
you
thank
so
you, everyone.
much.
Great.
Take care.
Bye-bye.